Okay, hey everyone, Dogen here, and welcome to the second episode of A Japanese Teacher Grades Your Japanese. In this series, I phonetically analyze your Japanese. So I listen to a recording of you speaking Japanese, and then I use my knowledge as a Japanese teacher that teaches Japanese phonetics, so pitch, accent, and pitch, accent, and pronunciation. I teach these on Patreon to analyze your Japanese again. My Japanese is far from perfect, and I've talked about this in the past, but I don't want to go down that road too much because I think it's better for everyone if we just get right into the video. So now what I'd like to do is go on to the second recording for today's lesson. And this video is going to be from Callie. So let's look at Callie's recording right now.
道元さん、こんにちは。私はカリと申します。そうね。私は24歳で、ボストン大学で考古学と日本語を勉強して、今まで3年だけ日本語の授業をとっていますが、子供から日本がずっと大好きだったので、大学に入った時、日本語を勉強してみようと思っていました。でも、授業で日本語を習うことに対して、道元さんと同じ意見があります。悪くないですけど、本物の日本人と話したら、もっと上手になれると思います。だからそのため、私は2学期前に京都に日本語を勉強しに行きました。その時間は4ヶ月ぐらいで、すごく楽しかったが、まだ関西弁ができないです。でも、日本で日本人と話したら、その日本人が私の日本語は、上手と言いますが、私は考えたら本当に上手かなと思います。例えば私はもっと深い話をしたいし、アニメを見たら字幕なし見たいし、でも今までそのものができないです。だから私の目的は、もっとペラペラになりたいですから、道元さんの意見を知りたいです。では、私のビデオを聞いてくれてありがとうございます。だから、よろしくお願いします。
Callie, I think that you're off to a wonderful start. This is also awesome because you've got great quality. You've got seems like a pretty good mic, and you added subtitles. I think the first rule that I want to talk about is the compound rule. So earlier in the video, you said something university, so something 大学. So let's try and find that right now.
ボストン大学で。
Boston 大学で. Okay, so the thing that I think that I thought that I was hearing actually isn't showing up, but I'm going to go ahead and cover this rule anyway, because I think that in your case it's less of a pitch accent thing and more of an intonation thing. So kind of like the inflections of how you map your emotions onto speech, and less about like what the accent of individual words are in a vacuum when you're not taking things such as like the speaker's intentions and emotions into account. But what I'm going to do is talk about the rule that I was going to cover. And that's that, and this is a big one, that's that in the majority of cases when two nouns in Japanese combine, what's going to happen is it's going to result in a low, high, low pitch accent pattern. So what do I mean by this? If we have the word iced coffee in Japanese, in isolation, the word ice has an accent on the as in ice.
Ice.
So the pitch starts high and then it goes low. But then if we combine that with the standalone word coffee, for the word for coffee, then we get ice coffee. And some kind of, I've found in my experience that some older people actually pronounce it as ice coffee. But I think that most young people, from what I've heard, say ice coffee. But the point that I'm trying to make is that the original pitch accent of ice, it changes, right? So the original pitch accent of the word gets overridden, and the pitch starts low, then it goes high, and then it stays high until the drop in ko. So ice coffee. Again, the rule here is that you want to listen for the low, high, low pattern in compounds. And once you start listening for this, you'll start hearing it everywhere. And the reason that I brought this up originally is because I think that you said Boston University. Great school, by the way. So in isolation, the word for 大学 or the university is 大学. It starts low, goes high, and stays high. 大学.
大学、大学。
But when you combine it with another noun, so Boston,
ボストン、ボストン。
it becomes Boston 大学.
ボストン大学、ボストン大学。
So again, it 大学, which is flat in isolation, receives a pitch accent so that the compound, the overall pitch accent pattern of the compound is low, high, low, low, high, low. So whether you're saying ice coffee or Boston 大学, whatever it might be, most of the time when individual nouns in Japanese combine to make compounds, then it's going to result in a low, high, low pitch accent pattern. And if you start listening for this, you'll start hearing it everywhere. Callie, because I kind of went off on a tangent and talked about something that you're kind of having trouble with, but it's less of a pitch accent thing. And I think that for your case, it's more about inflection and intonation. So rather than the individual words in Japanese, it sounds more like your general inflection patterns are from English. I think that you're a native English speaker are kind of mapping themselves onto Japanese. So I'm going to kind of get a little bit abstract here for a second. It kind of sounds like
子供から日本がずっと大好きだったので、大学に入った時、日本語を勉強してみようと思っていました。でも、授業で
you're really, really good at articulating your thoughts. So you're not pausing at all. You've done all of this in one take. The way that you're putting your words together to create sentences is really, really good. I can tell that this is your forte, your strong, one of your strong suits when it comes to Japanese. Maybe potentially what happened is that the way that you studied Japanese, I think you said that you studied for 3 years in the classroom.
3年だけ日本語の授業をとっていますが、
Maybe you studied Japanese really hard in the classroom, and that's why you got such a good command of how to create sentences in Japanese that make sense. And again, you did this all in one take, which is really impressive. But perhaps, I think that in your case, because it was all in the classroom, if you just listen to many, many, many more hours of native speech and kind of through osmosis, through listening to so much native speech rather than foreigners in the classroom trying to speak Japanese, you'll get a better unconscious understanding of the pitch accent patterns, or the pitch accent patterns that exist in Japanese, but also the various ways that Japanese people map their emotions onto words. It kind of ties together with pitch accent as well, because you need to know a little bit of pitch accent in order to naturally do that. It would be good for you as well to assume that fewer words have accents. But I think that for your particular circumstances, the best thing that you can do is going to be the opposite of what I recommended for Haru-san in the previous video. Pick a Japanese movie. I typically think it's best if you use a normal movie with actual actors rather than an anime, because oftentimes anime, as I talked about in the previous lesson, it'll exist in like a fantasy world or stuff like that, and you can't also get the cultural knowledge from that. But if you watch maybe like something like Terrace House on Netflix, or one of the movies that I usually recommend to my students on Patreon it's called 12 Kind Japanese People. So I'll put the Japanese name here in the video. But that movie is fantastic for learning all sorts of Japanese phonetics rules. And the reason for that is because it's a courtroom drama. And the entire movie takes place within a room, one room, and all the actors are just talking for 2 hours straight. No one speaks with an accent in that movie. So like people often ask me on Patreon, can I use the movie Your Name as a viable native input? And it's better than nothing, certainly, but I believe that one of the characters, the girl in that movie, speaks in a dialect. And that's not ideal if you're trying to just learn kind of standard Japanese. If you kind of speak in a dialect sometimes because of the words that you picked up and what she was saying in that movie, but then you speak in standard Japanese other times, it makes your Japanese sound fragmented. It's better if you listen to a movie that it's just only standard Japanese. So again, the movie that I personally recommend the most is 12 Kind Japanese People. It's a little bit hard to find because it's an older movie, but it's nonstop speech from the beginning to the end. And if you just put that on repeat in the background while you do other things, while you brush your teeth, while you do your homework, while you do whatever you need to do, while you clean your room, that'll go really, really, really far for you. You just need more input at this point. I think other than that, you're off to a really, really good start. I think this video is probably long enough, so I'm going to end things here. If you want me to correct your Japanese, you can send me a video of you speaking Japanese through, using Twitter. So at me on Twitter, at Dōgen, embed the video, include a download link to the video, and also, if you can, add subtitles. I gotta go right now. My kids are kind of freaking out, but I'll talk to all you guys again soon. Sayonara.